Even before this video began, maybe you were shown an ad about the food you've eaten, or that new phone you liked that came out recently. You had to wait for the next 5 seconds while it happened, or maybe nothing at all. Every piece of information we consume on a daily basis, be it a short video, or an article, or even music we listen to, is layered with consumerism. That's how this neo economy of attention functions. All media, everything tailored to perfection for you and your desires. We live in a time and place often chaotic and confusing, mediated by images and languages dictating our truths and reality. We become what we consume. This very internet becomes a space of performance for our abstracted realities, a constructed spectacle representing one's own self. And just like Rene Magritte's painting, this is not a pipe, I am also not real. This is just my voice recorded from a script written in a Word file being relayed to you from a Google server located in some place across the world. With this constant consumption of imagery, we often begin to blur the boundary between the real and the image, even if it is for a minuscule second. As Guy Debord explains it, the spectacle cannot be understood as a mere visual deception produced by mass media technologies. It is a worldview that has actually been materialized. While an alienating gap between the modes of production and product exists, this new form of alienation goes even further by reducing the product to an image, where one is sold the idea of the product rather than the product itself. As culture, leisure, sex, politics, and even death turn into commodities, consumption increasingly constructs the way we see the world. The decision to buy a washing machine or a shirt depends less on the finances and more on one's subjective reaction to everything, from TV shows to crime and pollution. Behind this fantastical image of consumerism lies a grim reality. Although this new mode of communication has transformed the way we operate in this world, surveilling capitalism certainly seems to have commodified even our very existence and behavior. All things you like, dislike, and are curious about on the web are collected, collated, and sold to companies, which then sells it to another company, which then sells it to another company in a forever endless loop. We become pawns of consumerism, one among thousands of people sold to companies for free to sell more ads only for us to buy more products. A bigger problem that starts to arise with this fast mode of consumption is the ever increasing manufacturing footprint of the products. The reports of massive overhaul in the environmental damage, 10% of the carbon emissions produced per year, which is more than international flights and shipping combined, is regularly contributed by the fast fashion industries and the other manufacturing companies that follow. This directly stems from the root cause, which is the fast-paced, mindless consumption rate of the consumer, and this is only from the production sector. The post-consumption problem goes on to magnify the generation of colossal amounts of waste propelled by us by our consumption patterns. The state of Maharashtra in India produces the highest amount of waste, out of which the city of Mumbai alone produces one-third of it, a major chunk of which ends up in landfills. And this is the tragedy of images, the real and the facade behind it, the duality that we live with every day. Capitalist commodification becomes the storm that relentlessly propels us into the future to which our backs are turned, while the pile of debris before us keeps going skywards. This is what we've called the storm of progress. And this seems to be the kind of consumerist future that we seem to be heading towards. The shopping mall becomes one such archetype of the contemporary times that represents the pinnacle of consumerism, a physical manifestation of India's post-liberalization aspirations made possible by the FDIs. From the 1990s, we witnessed a tremendous boom in the retail industry, with a relentless push towards this new form of commodification. A hyper-stylized imagination of modernity, a space for retail therapy in a contained and controlled environment. It works like a machine to generate one's own perceived identity. Upon further study, one finds the extensive science that goes behind the making of the mall. These structures are designed with this kind of control in mind. Long, intentional movement patterns studying across shops designed only to entice us into consuming endlessly. Over time, this evolution led to the death of its own creation due to several reasons. Even before the pandemic, the malls had started seeing a sharp decline in its visitors, mainly due to the decentralized online commercial industry of Amazons and Flipkarts. There is a rise of these large footprints laying derelict with no purpose or people in them. The thesis asks the questions: what happens to these consumerist temples post-consumption? Beyond just constant consumption, what is the relevance of this image that the consumerist architecture creates? What does the image mean for the city? The intervention strategy turns the metaphor of the mall upside down into an infrastructure that addresses the afterlife of our consumerist lifestyle. The strategy for reinvigorating the dead mall doesn't fetishize its schizophrenic nature, but rather makes an attempt to subvert it by materializing the dematerialized ideas on which the mall is built on. It begins by deconstructing this act of indulging with the commodity. The bodies that once participated in collective gratification still happen in the same building, only in ones and zeros. Long cold aisles of servers mapping each ad click, still serving the same purpose, but dehumanized in the physical space, participating in the larger phenomenon of surveilling capitalism. Machines recycling the colossal amounts of waste created by our discarded products, bridging this vast alienation between the product and its manufacturing processes, allowing a chain of a circular manufacturing process and resourceful assemblage functioning within the city. From the study of the existing fabric of the dead and functioning malls in the city of Mumbai, one of the oldest buildings, City Mall, was chosen. The site is layered with a mix of movements and different usage of land around it. The mall has been dead for the past few years, being on the same site for almost 20 years, yet generating no footfall whatsoever. The intervention begins with the hypothesis of deconstructing the existing building. Stripped off of all its whims and fancies, the structure is left bare with no facade, to be repurposed as infrastructure. A thorough study was done in order to understand the semantics of the existing channels of waste treatment in the city, right from the time the resources are extracted to manufacturing, discarding, the way it is treated by the formal, informal channels, and how some of it is recycled and how some of it ends up in landfills. The waste produced includes a plethora of resources: plastic, paper, e-waste, fabric, etc. The same study helps devise the position that the intervention takes as a recycling facility. The intervention sits in the middle of this, recycling the waste back to a resource in a circular process. How does the existing grid mutate into a living machine? Building on this idea, I tried out several experiments and iterations that would help devise a formal language for reusing the existing structure. The building is programmatically chopped up into three pieces, with the center for the recycling facility and the edges for the data center. The ground will then start to interact with the movements of the site below. The structure grows volumes in the front and the back of the building. The atrium now becomes a segregation zone, and the central part of the building is upcycled to function vertically. The building grows upwards, towers for the data center, almost surveilling the city. A marker like a mutant that changes its figure over time, and dark fingers holding it afloat. The monolith is broken down at the bottom, with interjections that open the structure to its surroundings. The absence of our bodies is the afterlife of the mall. An object in the museum that is the city, the mall celebrates its own death. The columns marked in red show the existing and additions made to the building are in black. As we see, the upper part shows the shop front and the admin offices where the main day-to-day operations of the waste facilities take place. The main lobby opens up to the staircase core leading all the way to the top with access to all the floors and the data center. The central part, the atrium on the ground floor, is turned into a segregation zone where the waste is loaded and unloaded onto the planes, which then goes onto the conveyor belt and then lifts. From it, the bottom leads to the organic waste management department. The two main shop fronts are provided at the edges that allow for easy interactions with the public to drop off the discards or place orders. The animation further shows the functioning of the recycling center that works somewhat like this. The MCGM trucks unload the collected waste from the ward to the main bins installed at the front, which then deposits the waste onto the planes for segregation. Once segregated, the waste then goes down to the conveyor belts and then to the lifts at the back, which then takes it to the respective floors where the materials are processed. The floors are installed with several machines that are also used by existing facilities, like the hydraulic press baling machine, igloo and fatka machine that compresses the metals, plastic bottles to fine shreds that can later be melted and used in several processes. Fabrics of t-shirts and plastic, small metals from our electronics can also be processed to be used again in the products. Once processed, the storage silos at the front become a mediator between the packaging and the processing units. These can withhold the processed resources up to volume of 265 cubic meters and help reduce the load on the packaging department. Once in the basement, after the products are processed and reduced to granules, the raw materials are stored and packaged to be picked up upon scheduling into, into the open market. The mall now is repurposed with the loop of circular renewal of resources from our own discards. On the first floor, the skywalk interjections connect to the mall and seamlessly slope down into a ramp and open out to the garden as an amphitheater. This allows for simple interactions between the public and the mall. The bottom half of the mall becomes a refreshment space for the people working at the facility to rest and eat at the canteen. The staircase core fitted in the middle is provided separately for ease of movement for the workers in the facility. The cut-apart axo shows the interaction of the public at the lower level of the building, with the skywalk and the garden at the back, that seamlessly allows one to walk into the building while going home from the metro, or vice versa. One can drop off material like their old t-shirts, smartphones, plastic bottles, etc. to be recycled for an added incentive. Canteens in the front become a pause point for the public and the people working in the facility. The south node of the mall punctures a connector with the organic waste department, where the organic waste that is treated that can be then used in the garden at the back or can be sold separately to an individual at the shop front. The viewing bridge connects to the other side of the mall with the resource deposit station. Here you can simply see the processes of waste management from above. On the top floor, the existing turf ground is retained with a new roofing system. A holistic wall section through all the programs mentioned before with the volumes of the silos added to the front facade. The structure of the silos acts as a thin steel scaffold attaching itself to the existing grid with a layer of 25 mm dia tensile bracing provided for the span within the typical grid of 4.5 meters by 4.5 meters, and a layer of polycarbonate sheets on top which allows the translucent natural light to brighten up the spaces within. The new additional roof added to the turf ground uses a sawtooth roof detail, supported by the added steel columns that bathes the ground with light from the west and also accommodates a clear height of 5 meters. Just an added note for this and further slides, do pause on any of them for more details and information. On the floor above, we reach the divided section of the mall, with the data center on the two ends, and the central part is the e-waste and the metal processing facility as seen in the working of the recycling processes earlier. With the towers rising up at the top of the building, the grid used is the same as the building below, and in addition to that, the buttresses that not only stiffen the existing structure but also help support the structure above. The way the system works is that the floor in itself becomes a beam supported from the sides and the points from the edges. This wall section cuts to the staircase core of one of the southwest towers, showing the breathable perforated skin for the light and ventilation. All the additions made to the building are in steel, with the blank faces that use a cotton steel detail that rots and changes with time. The 1000 mm dia hollow steel buttress moves about 6.5 meters away from the existing footing. The joinery at every junction of the column is done as such that allows for incremental or decremental growth of the structure. Here is a typical plan of the structure above the building, showing the linear forms of the data center with the main circulation cores on the side. The staircase core in the detail shows the breathable MS perforated sheets used for the staircase cores on the sides of the building. The exploded axonometric shows the design of a typical room of a data center, where the floor is raised by 700 mm from the concrete slab for the cooling of the entire room to happen from the bottom. The heat released from the servers is trapped into a duct at the center, which rises up and is let out from the ducts above. The space provided at the front is for the compressors and other machineries used for the cooling of the facility. The south face of the building capitalizes on the solar energy collection with a solar wall to help with the energy consumption of the building to generate about 10,000 kilowatts of energy daily. The collected energy efficiently helps reduce the energy footprint consumed by the facilities of the building. The services layout indicates the water supply and drainage systems laid out with the rainwater harvesting system done from the sawtooth roof of the turf ground and the water collected from the roofs above. This collected water helps the facility and for the gardening at the back. The longitudinal section cuts through all the programs, showing the amalgamations and mutations with the interventions done in the project. It now creates a mix of such interventions with the people and the city at varying scales. There is a degree of chaos with this new dehumanized form of the mall, with servers bleeping in silent rooms warmed by our presence, still serving the same purpose, an eerie place for everything. Products that once left the ATM bagged in shimmery bags come back to the same space, fractured only to be recycled and sent again to the production systems. The mall absorbs even the darker parts of its own, materializes it, and performs yet again, even if it is with its own counterparts. The architecture of consumerism is still a spectacle with this new infrastructure that takes precedence yet weaves itself with the city and its people. An image that holds a mirror to our civilization and questions our ideas of consumption. The thesis isn't a case of a distant dystopia, but only a speculative imagination of our identities and lived reality, an invisible creation of our own, the other side of this storm of progress which is now materialized. The gears of this consumerist machine still run in sync with the way things are, but today the mall tries to save and fix what it can, and maybe that is a dead mall's fantasy. Thank you.